Hey, I'm Mike Darter. Welcome back to the CCW Safe Podcast. We're here in Oklahoma City
I'm Stan Campbell
with the black gloves on.
with my black gloves on, just in case Mike tries to touch me.
Yeah, you never know.
You never know. We
Um,
spend so much time together.
oh, yeah. Welcome back to the podcast. We have an awesome guest, and we're going to get right into it today because we have limited time with him, and then we'll kind of finish up at the end. We'll kind of go through some things. But we have Andrew Branca on the podcast
That's
today.
right.
Once again, one of our favorite
What,
guests,
one of our favorite guests and attorneys. I call him the godfather
the Godfather.
of self-defense law.
Self-defense law. So if you don't
Well,
know
happy
who
to have
Andrew
you.
Branca is, you got to find out. You've got
You
to do
really
some
do.
research on him. I'm sure all of you know who he is. Andrew, great to have you here again.
Glad to be here, guys. Always happy to be on with you.
Thank you so
We've
much.
got a
sir.
lot of stuff going on right now with all this COVID-19. I know we've had some calls in reference to it.
That's right.
So I think that's what we're going to be talking about today, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
And then Andrew has a case that he researched for us in reference to
Oh,
an
nice.
incident like that. But Andrew, just to jump right in, we had a member just recently call in, and he just wanted to know, nationwide, there's a lot of law enforcement agencies that are putting charges on people for terroristic acts or threats by threatening to cough on someone saying they got COVID-19, and he wanted to find out if, it was okay for him to use deadly force in a situation like that. So of course, we gave him the right information, but I said, you know what, we got Andrew on, so I want to talk about that because people don't understand that you just can't use a firearm anytime you just want to. So we want to have you break down some of that stuff and kind of talk about some of the challenges and things that they'll run into with that type of case.
Sure. Well, I mean, the legal standards don't change just because COVID showed up. So before you can use deadly force in self-defense, you have to be facing an imminent threat of deadly harm from whoever that aggressor is. And of course, you need to be the innocent party and so forth. All the five elements of self-defense claims have to be checked off in order for that use of deadly defensive force to be justified. So the question is someone just coughing on you, does that qualify as an imminent threat of deadly harm? And this comes up a lot, even in the absence of COVID, in punching cases, barehanded punching cases,
Mm-hmm.
because we've all heard about cases in which someone was punched once and it killed them.
Mm-hmm.
These knockout game punches, where typically they're punched, they immediately lose consciousness, they fall, they hit their head on the street, they die from the head injury.
That's right.
So we know a single punch can happen, but the courts never treat a thrown fist as deadly force under normal circumstances because in the vast majority of the cases, someone who's involved in a typical fist fight, by which I mean usually it's two men or two people of similar size, strength, and fighting ability, nobody dies, nobody suffers serious bodily injury, and the courts don't want to provide an excuse for people to escalate what should be a relatively harmless fist fight into a gunfight.
That's right.
Right? If they say a fist fight qualifies as deadly force, then you'd be entitled to respond to that with a gun. And they don't want fistfights to escalate to gunfights. So invariably, they treat a thrown fist as non-deadly force. You can defend yourself against it, but not with deadly defensive force. You have to use non-deadly force, your own fist, pepper spray, a taser, something along those lines. And of course, always the best way to win a fight is to not be there, right? Is
That's
to
right.
get away if you possibly can, to not have to use any force at all. Now, there are exceptions to that rule, and the exceptions where the courts will treat a barehanded attack as a deadly force attack is where there are aggravating circumstances that actually raise the possibility that that barehanded attack could reasonably inflict, not possibly, not speculatively, not hypothetically, but has a reasonable chance of inflicting death or grave bodily harm. And those aggravating factors are factors that put us outside the traditional fistfight, outside of two guys of similar size, strength, and fighting ability, by which I mean the aggressor, for example, is much larger or much stronger than the person they're punching. The aggressor has a much greater fighting ability than the person they're punching. And by the way, when it's a male on female attack, those characteristics tend to be baked into the cake, right? Because most male aggressors are going to be larger, stronger, have more fighting ability than their female victims. Not always, but in most of the case, those characteristics get baked into the cake. So where the aggressor has some unusual force characteristics because he's larger, stronger, exceptional fighting ability, that attack with bare hands might be one that can readily inflict death or serious bodily injury. And if that's true, then you'd be privileged to use deadly defensive force against that attack. The trouble is, it's very subjective, right? How much bigger is someone? How much stronger is someone? How much exceptional fighting ability do they have? And the prospects that you would know that are kind of sketchy, right? If you're attacked by a stranger, you don't know how strong they are or what their fighting ability is.
Correct.
But if you did know, those might be circumstances that could be taken into account. That's the legal argument you would make. They'd say, well, you were in a fist fight. Why did you go to your gun? You'd say, well, he was exceptionally strong or large or had some exceptional fighting ability I didn't have.
Hey, now, Andrew, just
other things. Go ahead.
Just jump in real quick, because I didn't hear you say it yet. But a lot of our members are above the age of 60, and there's some that are reaching up to 70. And I mean, there's two things. Their concern, of course, with COVID is the fact that it does affect those in that age range more so than anyone else. But also, when it comes down to fighting ability and does age, is that built into or baked in the cake? Isn't that what you said? I love that.
Yeah, baked in the cake.
Is that baked in the cake as well?
It's really the other side of the coin. So one side of the coin is, does the aggressor have some exceptional ability? The other side of the coin that can be an aggravating factor is, does the victim have some unusual vulnerability? And that could be age related. A 70-year-old who gets knocked to the ground is in a different position than a 20-year-old who gets knocked to the ground. That can be a debilitating injury to the 70-year-old. The older we get, we tend to be less strong, right? More vulnerable to injury. If a victim, for example, is on blood thinners for medical reasons, well, he can't take a blow to the head like someone who's not on blood thinners. So for him, the same punch that might be non-deadly force if thrown at me, that identical punch could be deadly force if thrown at him because of his exceptional vulnerability. So, and it doesn't matter, by the way, whether or not the attacker knows you have the vulnerability. You're making your self-defense decisions based on what you know. If you know you're on blood thinners, well,
Yes,
you know
that's
that
correct.
punch is a deadly force threat. Doesn't matter if the guy throwing the punch doesn't know. That's on him. All those factors come into play with COVID too. So for most people, you look at the CDC data, 98% of people who get infected with COVID suffer flu-like symptoms or no symptoms at all. So for the typical person who might even get infected by a cough, is it death or serious bodily injury? I mean, obviously, if you have no symptoms, it's no injury, really, or nothing you could quantify as serious bodily injury. Flu can suck. Does flu qualify as serious bodily injury? I don't know. I mean, I could make that straight-faced argument. But there doesn't appear to be much of a threat of death for most people. But, of course, there is a fraction of the population that is genuinely high risk and for whom COVID is a completely different disease. It is a deadly illness that can readily kill them. So that would be the analogy to someone who's on blood thinners, for example. They have an exceptional vulnerability that changes the circumstances for them, changes the threat for them in a way that might not apply to one of us who's not in a high-risk category. And, of course, age is not the only way to be high risk. Comorbidities, other illnesses, there's a variety of ways. So anybody would need to be aware of that. Now, in terms of, well, how do you know if the person saying they're coughing on you with COVID, how do you know if they even have COVID? Well, frankly, to my mind, it doesn't matter, really, if they're trying to create in your mind the impression they have COVID. It's just like someone who's robbing you and they have their hand in the pocket of their hoodie and they're pointing with their finger. They don't really have a gun, but they're doing everything they can to convince you that they have a gun. Well, you're allowed to make the reasonable inference that's consistent with what they're communicating. They're saying, give me all your money, pretending they have a gun. You're allowed to make the reasonable inference that they have a gun. Someone gets mad at you and says, I have COVID, I'm going to infect you, and starts coughing. To my mind, it doesn't really matter whether they have COVID or not. What matters is what you reasonably perceive to be the case. And if they've told you that's the case, you can take them at their word and make the reasonable inference that, in fact, they have it. Now, of course, one of the difficulties here is if someone says something threatening, like I have COVID, and then they cough on you, and you shoot them, the cough and the threat is ambiguous, right? Were there witnesses? Did anyone else hear that? Is it just your word? The gunshot injury's not ambiguous. You shot him. So that's a very difficult position to be in because the cops show up and they're saying, well, obviously this guy was really shot. Was there a threat? Was there a cough? Was there? So it's not a position you want to be in. So what I've been describing are the legal arguments your lawyer would make in your defense. But man, that's a tight spot.
It is. And
you don't want to rest of your life
And
hinging on those arguments.
one of the things that we enjoy about you, Andrew, and aligning ourselves with you is that you too are aligned with our core values and how we express to our members to avoid and de-escalate. And the COVID-19 is I mean, if you look at it as a weapon, you can look at it as any other weapon, and is that, your first duty is to avoid it, number one, so create space and de-escalate, get away from that, create some distance so that the cough won't bother you. So,
Right.
we look at it as any other weapon. So, we really want you guys to, take some time to think about this. And, we try to express as well that once you take away weapons out of the equation, then, the reasonableness of your actions is tenfold when it comes to, 2 years later when it's, judged by 12 people, 12 citizens that have to, decide whether or not it was a reasonable act as well, and if they would have acted in the same manner.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
that's a really important point, because people have to keep in mind uh, there's the event that occurs, and there's the narratives, the stories about the event that are being told later, right? The
Yeah.
people who are judging your conduct, the police, the prosecutors, the judge, the jury, none of them were there when it happened. None of them were there when the fight occurred. So they don't know what happened in any absolute sense. All they can do is look at the evidence, make reasonable inferences from the evidence. In effect, what they're hearing are stories about what happened. And of course, the prosecution's telling one story, your defense lawyer is telling another story. But not only are they just stories, but they're removed in time from when the event happened. So it's a year later or 2 years later. And everyone's not in the same state of COVID fear 2 years from now as they are today. They
That's
may not
right.
even remember how they were feeling emotionally 2 years
Yeah.
earlier. So if someone coughed on you today and you had to explain it away, well, maybe they'd be amenable to that explanation. But would they be still amenable 2 years from now when COVID's just a memory and everyone's just trying to get back to work and fix the country and all that kind of stuff, and you've shot somebody? It's not a position I'd want to be in.
Absolutely. You got anything, Mike?
No, I think that
We lost you.
sorry, hit my switch. I think that the appropriateness or reasonableness of the of force is what really comes to my mind because 80% of people who if they contracted the illness, they're going to have just mild symptoms. So like you were saying, knowing your own health hazards or deficiencies or whatever, to react to with a gun to somebody coughing on you, it just doesn't. There's not that reasonableness, match of force.
Right. And the thing to keep in mind too is that what we're allowed to protect ourselves against is the force that's about to occur. Force that's already occurred is no longer a threat, right? So it's like if somebody comes up and shoves you and stops right there. Well, once they stop, they're no longer a threat. If you use force against them for the shove that's passed, that's just retribution. If someone's coughed, you're not allowed to use force for a cough that's happened already. That's done. It would have to be for some imminent threat that's about to occur, something continuing in progress. And I'm not sure how you know that. Are they going to keep coughing or not keep coughing? And frankly, if it were me and I thought someone was going to keep coughing, my first response would be to create distance to get, it's a very short range projectile weapon, right? It's a cough. It's a few feet. So you just have to create a few feet distance. And at least from what the government tells us, 6 feet's enough, right? That's the social distance they're recommending when you go shopping and so forth. So just get outside of 6 feet and then, continue creating distance as much as necessary to secure your safety.
That's right.
And, like you said, this is nothing new. I mean, we've had HIV threats from people before. Stan and I work in the street. We always had
Spit
people,
blood on us. Yeah.
people trying to spit on you, and that became a felony, used to not be, and now it is. So it's nothing new. It's just the fact that coronavirus is new.
Yeah, and by the way, so we're all talking about the defense, the justification for the use of some defensive force, but in terms of the aggressor who's doing the coughing, that's absolutely a crime. I mean, if he's putting you in fear of harm, that's an assault.
Right.
And the law doesn't really care what the nature of the harm is. It just has to be some kind of harm. So if the authorities were to conclude that, coughing on you only represents non-deadly harm, it would be a simple assault. If they concluded it to represent a deadly harm, it would be an aggravated assault. It would be felony assault. uh, they're going to make that decision. But certainly it's not lawful for somebody to do that. That's a crime in and of itself.
Yeah, and then did you have a chance to research any other? Because I haven't heard of any cases in which, someone tried to defend their use of force reference to a cough. But were you able to find one of those for us?
Well, I mean, all of this is new, so we don't really have anything that's gone through the process, so you know how the legal system's actually going to treat it. I mean, one of the most common cases I've heard just involved two guys at a gas station who got into a fight, and one complained the other wasn't covering his mouth, and one guy assaulted the other guy with his vehicle, and the other guy responded by shooting at him with a gun.
Oh,
and
my God.
frankly, it struck me as the kind of usual, two a-holes who just were looking to get into a fight, really, and COVID was just the excuse. But we don't know how that's going to be treated in the legal system. I would just don't be those people, and you'll probably be just fine.
Justin, you got any question for Andrew?
No, that was the one thing. The case that he just brought up, I'm seeing reports of that kind of stuff in forums and online where it's exactly what he's talking about. Some guy's minding his business and some other person decides they're going to be the mask police. And
that's a good way.
It starts from there.
Yeah.
It kind of goes back to the podcast we talked about before. One of the easiest ways to get through all this is just don't be a dick.
That's right.
Yeah. Mind your own business. Take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And
I mean, we all remember the handicap parking spot case, right?
Oh, absolutely.
That was a few months ago where a guy decided to be the handicap parking space police. You could argue the facts a couple different ways in that case, but nevertheless, he got convicted of murder. He's going to spend the rest of his life in prison. And the catalyst was his decision to start scolding someone about how they were parking in a handicapped space.
That's right.
The moment you get engaged with someone, you don't know how that things might spin out of control. You're starting a fire. You don't know how that fire is going to rage.
It's a great analogy.
It doesn't mean you should never interact with people in public, but choose your spots wisely.
No, absolutely. And and Mike and I talk about this in our de-escalation class on CCW Safe's website. We talk about the fact that it's important to, number one, make the right decision, not be the one who escalates the incident, and second to that, treat every incident as if or your decisions as if you didn't have a gun. So what would I do in this instance if I didn't have a gun? Would I actually approach this 300-pound man, or would I involve myself in this domestic dispute? Well, the answer is no. So you got to treat those incidents in which you would act the same as if you didn't have a firearm. So I think that's really, really important.
That's a great point. I know a lot of people who do a lot of international travel, and I often ask them, because here in America, I carry a gun for personal protection. I know when they're here living in America, they usually carry a gun. I ask them when they go on trips, do they, you can't carry a gun in most of the rest of the world. And they say they probably wouldn't carry a gun even though they could, because they're concerned it would change their demeanor. It would change how they interact with other people. And you might be prepared, even without realizing it, to put yourself in more dangerous spots if you know you have the gun to fall back on, and quicker to prevent that from happening if you know you don't have the gun to fall back on. Here in America, you just have to be smart about it, folks. And when you run into people who seem like they're quick to go to the gun, eager to go to the gun on the internet forums or Facebook or in person, or you do not want to associate with those people.
That's right.
Anyone who seems like they're eager to get into a gunfight is nobody you want to be around.
Yeah, and I know you're always on the forums, and the forum is a big ego fest as well.
The internet in general.
Oh yeah, so a lot of people get on there and they'll say certain things that they would do, or I would have and I should have, but they actually wouldn't. So don't get pulled into someone else's high-fiving and decisions to use force on someone. Go ahead,
that's something you just said it and it made me think of it. Andrew, could you speak a little bit about the impact internet posts or Facebook posts, or some guy posts on Facebook, well, if anybody tries to cough on me, I'm going to shoot him, and then a week later he gets into a shooting. I mean.
Yeah, it's actually absolutely devastating. And anything that goes to your state of mind. And by the way, law enforcement knows that Facebook exists, folks. They know that internet forums exist. And the first thing they do is they get a subpoena for all of your social history, social media history. They get your phone, they get your computers, they get your passwords, they get everything. And then they call up Facebook and they say, give us all these guys' records. And what do you think Facebook's going to say if they got a court order? they're going to give it all up,
That's
right?
right.
They're required to give it all up. And now the cops are looking through everything you've ever put on the internet, including stuff that was deleted, folks. Deleting stuff doesn't make it go away in the
That's right.
computer world, okay? It just kind of flags it so it's invisible. But they still have it.
Yeah.
And by the way, when you do delete stuff, it makes it look like even you thought it was wrong.
That's
So it
right.
looks like consciousness of guilt evidence now that you've deleted it. But anything that goes to your state of mind, I can assure you, a prosecutor's going to use against you in court. You're trying to argue, listen, I shot that person, but I had to do it to save my life. And they're going to say, well, that's what you're saying, but we think you did it because you wanted to. You had some motivation other than self-defense. And we know that to be the case because you told us. You told the whole world by posting this stuff up on Twitter or putting silly stickers on your car, like those terrorist hunting permit stickers, you know. Which we all know are a joke, but heaven forbid you had to defend yourself against someone who happens to be Muslim, for example. You think a prosecutor's not going to argue, hey, this guy was looking for an opportunity to shoot someone of that religious faith. We know so because he put a sticker on his car saying so. Same thing with internet posts. Don't put stuff on there that goes to your state of mind if that state of mind could be interpreted as advocating some kind of unlawful conduct.
Awesome.
Great, thank you.
So Andrew, I know you gotta jump off real quick, but before you go, tell everybody where they can find you. Just to let you guys know, Andrew's book. Once you become a CCW Safe member, you get his book for free. All you gotta do is pay the shipping and handling. The Law of Self-Defense. Make sure you grab it. Tell us about you real quick, Andrew,
and your classes,
and your classes and stuff.
Sure. Well, we always recommend people just obviously visit our website, lawofselfdefense.com. We always have some free content up there. If people would like a genuine education in self-defense law, there's few places to get it better than our own full-day classes. We only do 3 of these a year. We do them online as a webinar. We have one coming up on Saturday, April 25th. It is a full-day class. It's 6-7 hours, but it's the equivalent of a law school education in self-defense law. If law schools taught this stuff, which sadly they really don't teach it at this depth. But I don't want that to scare people. All the legalese is translated into plain English. We've had thousands of students through the class, all different types of people, different jobs, different careers, different ages. And it teaches you what you need to know in plain English to stay within the legal boundaries. Because the bottom line, folks, is if most of the cases I work on as an attorney are cases involving normal law-abiding people, never been in trouble with the law a day in their lives outside of a speeding ticket or something like that. And now they find themselves charged with a felony. They're looking at 10 or 20 years in prison because they had to threaten somebody else with force. And they didn't know they were doing this. They thought they were acting in lawful self-defense. The most common thing I hear is, I can't believe I'm being prosecuted for having acted in self-defense. The trouble is they only think they acted in lawful self-defense. Unfortunately, what they knew about self-defense law was mostly wrong. They were mostly mistaught. They stepped over the legal boundary without knowing they were doing so. But the law doesn't care whether or not you knew you were doing it. They only care whether or not you did it. If you know where that legal boundary is and you stay inside it, you make yourself really hard to convict. Because the state has to disprove your claim of self-defense beyond a reasonable doubt. Where most well-intentioned law-abiding people get in trouble is they make it easy for the prosecution to do that because they step over the legal boundary. So really important to know where that legal boundary is. One of the best places you can possibly learn it is in our class. So if folks are interested in that, it's Saturday, April 25th. They can learn more at lawofselfdefense.com/live online. That's one word, live online. lawofselfdefense.com/live online. We're only doing 3 of these in 2020, folks, and this is one of them. So
That's great.
when the seats are gone, the seats are gone.
Hey, Andrew, also, before we let you go, you have, do you have anything, because there's a lot of new firearms purchasers and, people that have stuff for home defense. Do you have anything that you're putting out for, the mass amount of Americans now that are new to the industry?
Or for, new people.
Yeah, really the best thing they could do is to pick up our book. It's not expensive. If they want to get it from Amazon.
Awesome.
I think we dropped him.
Yeah. So it's also available.
Oh, there he is.
Yeah, it's available on Amazon as well.
Expensive, folks. The Kindle version, I think, is $9 and change. Folks, most of the cases I work on, the lead counsel is getting retainers of $30,000 to $50,000. So if that's pre-trial. If you go to trial, it can easily be a multiple of that amount. Invest $9 and change or $20 for the print book. and educate yourself on this stuff, because if you don't, all that training you're doing is just training yourself to go to prison.
That's right.
And if there's a fatality involved, that number's going to probably go up to around 100,000 pre-trial.
Easily, right?
Yeah.
So most of the cases I do that involve a killing charge, a manslaughter, or murder charge, very common to exceed $150,000 in legal expenses pre-trial, before the first day of trial. And then, of course, it becomes a multiple after that once we go to trial. So very expensive, but the cost of educating yourself is really inexpensive. And you owe it to yourself. As we always say here at Law of Self-Defense, we carry guns. I carry a gun, so I'm hard to kill. So my wife, my children are hard to kill. That's why I carry a gun. Well, you owe it to yourself and to your family to also be hard to convict. And I don't mean learn legal tricks. I mean learn where the legal boundaries actually are, so you stay within them. And if you do that, you're hard to convict. If you don't do that for yourself, you're just leaving yourself incredibly vulnerable to enormous legal, financial expenses, really catastrophic expenses, and or spending a good part of the rest of your life in a cage.
And Andrew is also one of our affiliates. Andrew, could you give him that affiliate link as well upon your exit?
I'm sorry, guys, I don't remember.
Okay, so it's ccwsafe.com. I think it should be / I think it's Law of Self-Defense.
Law of Self-Defense, yeah.
I think so. Sorry, guys, I'm bad at this kind of stuff.
That's okay, you're good.
It's all right.
Anyway, so we really enjoyed you. Thank you so
thanks,
much.
Thanks, Andrew, for your time. And
perfect timing. I really appreciate it.
We don't play around over here.
Yeah. Happy to be on any time. I'll give my best to Don West.
Yes, sir.
And you guys stay safe in this crazy COVID world.
That's right.
We'll do.
All right, take care, man. Stay safe.
Bye-bye.
So there's one thing that he brought up that I wanted to touch on before I forget. He talked about no matter how you see it, no matter what you think you did. It's one thing that we've seen in law enforcement, and we've also talked to Dr. Artwall, Alexis Artwall. That's another good book. I would say get Law of Self-Defense. Anybody new to firearms, Law of Self-Defense, and I would say get Deadly Encounters. There's a second edition out now, the second book by Dr. Artwall. Alexis Artwall is a police psychologist. She studied officer-involved shootings for 30 years. And one of the things we've talked about is, and this is, if you're involved in a shooting, we talk about intense second guessing, some of the physiological effects, but we've also talked about if you have 5 people who observe a shooting, you're going to get probably 3 to 5 totally different stories of what happened, because people, what they see, and she talks about, vision is not in the eyes. The account comes from goes from the eyes to the brain. So people are going to see that incident different ways. So, even if you think you're in the right or you think you did this, other people may not see it that way. And, because of the physiological effects and the stress that you're going to be under during that time, the actual physical evidence may not show that,
That's right. And then on just to piggyback Michael, always guys remember that, we do these podcasts so that you can actually learn from either other people's challenges or the information that our experts have. And you really have to take into account, what you're going to do, because it's our job sometime to protect you from you. And that's why we're giving you the information so that you keep yourself out of trouble.
So we didn't get to do our normal kind of intro.
No, but I do have a funny thing about
what?
Mama Mona moment.
Oh my gosh, Mama Mona moment.
So
Okay.
Mama Mona came up to visit me this past weekend, in my new house, my first guest. So she stayed over, and I'm resting in part of the house, and all of a sudden she comes running into my room. And she's like, "Oh, Stanley, I set my hair on fire." I was like, "What?" No. So I had a candle lit on the side of her, and she was trying to plug in something, and her hair had dripped down into the candle, and she lit herself on fire. She had a Michael Jackson moment.
Did she have a Pepsi running across with
She had a Michael Jackson moment. And, I was so happy. I said, "Thanks for not coming in here, and, on fire." Because the first thing I'd have grabbed was a pillow, and that's a pillow fighting her to put it out. But, Mama Mona's okay, though.
For everybody wondering,
She's okay.
I can't wait to get. We're gonna get this jingle. I can't wait to have a weekly just talk with Mama
She
Mona.
is funny.
She's so awesome.
She is something else.
Anything else new? Anything coming up?
No, I mean we're still. Don't forget for all you the people that know folks that are new gun owners that are just getting a firearm to protect their home. We still have that home defense for 100 days. It's $100 off on the home defense plan. So share this podcast with your friends, especially the new shooters, so they can also get the information from Andrew Branca as well. Follow Don West and Sean Vincent's podcast, and we actually just share a wealth of knowledge. The one thing that we pride ourselves here at CCW Safe on is that we actually we own that space of teaching you guys what happens after the shooting.
Right.
Everyone else that they want to teach you how to hit targets, and we're gonna let them have that. Ours is what happens afterwards, and after the smoke is cleared, what do you call that?
The aftermath.
The aftermath of a shooting. So aftermath of a shooting. So that's our space. So we want to go ahead and give you that information so that educate yourself, de-escalate, and avoid the incident.
That's right.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. After constantly looking at these cases and everything, and not only that, but anybody who knows anybody that's worked in the justice system or has been through it or had some kind of experience, even if it's not with the justice system, just with government in general, once you get involved in that machine, you kind of lose control of your destiny.
Oh yeah.
Like you are completely at the mercy of a machine that does not care about you, does not care about your family. You're just one more number in that machine.
No, you're absolutely right.
If you go to prison for the rest of your life or you walk out the door, the machine, it really doesn't care because tomorrow it's going to do the same thing over again. And so that's one thing I would just urge people really to consider, especially now in these times when everyone is on edge and everybody's a little bit scared, everybody's nervous. And I think before long we'll see people starting to get a little bit desperate.
That's right.
Because, if there's a lot of people out there that don't have a job right now and they don't know where their next job's going to come from, that makes people do strange things.
Yeah.
So if you can just focus on de-escalation and, if something looks sketchy, leave, man.
Yeah.
Just leave.
Yeah.
Just turn around and go. And if a guy's insulting you and he's trying to, don't let somebody goad you into making a decision that can change your life.
Yeah.
Over nothing.
And there's something, I tell people a lot, new people that go through classes, and they go through a class, they go through a self-defense class, concealed carry class. And remember, if you're going through a concealed carry permit, that is not a training course. That is a certification course. The bare minimum training, really that level of training that's involved in that, I don't really even think meets the basic training requirements. I mean, you're going to get basic firearm safety, the 4 rules of firearm safety, but that is a certification course. And a lot of people come out of that course, and the least amount of information in those courses is always illegal. And they come out, and I've had people ask, well, what, now that I have my gun, I got all this, I got my permit, when can I use it? At what point could I legally use it? And I tell people all the time, the way that's kind of a reverse thinking. I mean, the way you have to think about it is, at what point have I exhausted all other options but to use my firearm? At what point do I have no other options but to use it? And that's the way people have to think. And, because we were in law enforcement, we investigated shootings. Some of us, I was involved in shootings. We've had other friends who are involved in shootings. Last week we had Blake Webster on, great guy, amazing trainer. He told his story of his shooting. We know people who have been in shooting, and we've seen what happens because, like Justin said, it's a machine. That machine is just churning all the time, every day. And, even in the case of Maddox, I don't think there was any ill will on on the department there. I don't think there was any, I don't think they were looking to make I think they were just saying, let it go, let it work out in the system.
That's right.
And that's what you see a lot today when things get busy, or, they don't have the training, or they don't have, the expertise in certain areas. They're just like, let's just let it work out in the system. So, we've seen that. So yeah, what Justin was saying, take the experience of others.
Do everything you can to stay out of it.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Because once you're in it,
There's
Oh,
no
yeah.
turning back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't put the shit back in the mule, as they say.
that's beautiful. How
You
can
know?
I have never heard that before?
Can't put the shit back in the mule.
Because you're not country. He is. They never said that in
You
the
can't
city.
put the toothpaste
Wow.
back in the tube.
Yeah.
Well, you can kind of, but you definitely can't put the shit back in the mule. So
That's awesome.
yeah. So I liked his saying too. Baked. That's how the
Baked into the cake.
So,
baked into the
all baked
cake.
into the cake.
yeah.
That's right, guys. So we're going to end this right now. Don't forget the home defense plan for the next. There's $100 off. It's called Home 100. So check that out. That's the code that you use to get the $100 off the home defense plan. And if you're already a member, the home defense plan and for home invasions, that comes with your membership. So you're good.
And that's off annual, right?
That's annual. Yes,
Annual
sir.
only. Okay.
Yep.
All right, you guys stay safe. We'll talk to you next week.